Hey everybody, I'm back and I wanted to talk about the food in Japan. This has been a topic of concern for a while based on GMOs and the labeling of GMOs. In foreign countries, a lot of times they label GMOs and give the consumers the responsibility to determine whether they're going to buy the product or not. And this is exactly what I predicted about a year ago would happen based on all the buzz behind CRISPR. And you add to the loss of revenue in the country of Japan following Fukushima and many other crises they're dealing with, economic issues they're dealing with. And also I can't forget the rising competition between Japan and China for dominance when it comes to biotech and research. So the Japanese government is poised to rule that CRISPR-edited foods are safe to eat. And I'll get into which foods there are, because if you search like which foods are shipped to the US from Japan, a lot of times you get like sushi and those types of products that are related with sushi or sashimi, but or even nori. It comes up, which is seaweed used to wrap the sushi. But a lot of times you don't get what people are really eating in Japan, and you don't know whether those foods, like the ones you see in this picture, there it looks like some carrots, some leeks, maybe some potatoes or something like that. So you don't know what they're eating and if those foods are also shipped here. It's important to know what foods they're planning to offer to consumers in Japan, at least, and whether or not they would be bought here for us to eat as well. So the recommendation from the government was made by a panel of scientists who just published a report on how gene edited foods could safely and responsibly be introduced into the marketplace. I apologize for the background noise. I'm actually in my car trying to record this, and I just had to jump on this because I got an alert from Futurism about this topic. Anyway, the final decision for releasing this type of food rests on the Japanese Ministry of Health. So what they're saying here, this is coming from an endocrinologist at Niigata University. They say that there's little difference between traditional breeding methods and gene editing in terms of safety. And that was the panel chair, Hirohito Sone. And that's what they told, he told, or she, I'm not sure, told NHK. And I think that's their national news network. But when you look on the fine print, the advisory panel concluded that CRISPR-edited foods shouldn't have to go through any more safety testing than anything else. So they're trying to put them on the same level as foods that we've been eating traditionally. But they say that they shouldn't have to go through safety if the scientists who did the gene editing didn't leave any foreign DNA or genes taken from any other organism in the final product. And if we come down some more, I think that's the end. Oh, they reassure. Here are the reassurances. Reassurances. Japan has struggled with genetically altered foods in the past, Science reports. And Science is the where they have the article about this too. When Japan approved the sale of genetically modified foods, which by their very nature contain foreign DNA, the public largely rejected them. And there is a lot of talk about that in Japan because people there will protest with signs and everything. They're very serious about not having GMOs in their food. However, that's why they gave them the choice. They're noticing a drop in revenue for the GMO foods in Japan. And I think that's also what prompted them to move to CRISPR in the food as well. They say to prevent similar backlash with this type of food, the CRISPR food, many of the recommendations made by the Japanese advisory panel promote transparency so that consumers know exactly what they're buying and how it does and doesn't differ from other foods. There are thorough explanations of the new technologies that are needed to ease the public concerns, and that's according to the endocrinologist that I just quoted earlier. Now, If we go to the science article that was mentioned in that previous article from Futurism, it was linked in blue. I'll leave links to these articles. This is a woman in a grocery store in Japan. And in Japan, as I said earlier, they have GMO labeling on the food. So you know if you want to buy that food or not. Some people in Japan actually will just try GMO foods just to see if they taste different. But at least you know that it's there. This was published yesterday. It says gene edited foods are safe according to a Japanese panel. And it's basically repeating the same thing from the previous article. They come down, if you come down here, you see a year ago, the US FDA concluded that most gene edited foods would not need regulation. That's important to remember. The most gene edited foods would not need regulation. That's as long as they're being produced using CRISPR. That's based on quality and quantity, shelf life, and reproducibility of these foods, showing you that the integrity of the foods is maintained from one batch to another, because that's a problem right now. Even with traditional food, reproducibility is a problem, even with all the technical advances that we have. The European Union's Court of Justice ruled in July 2018 that gene-edited crops must go through the same lengthy approval process as traditional transgenic plants. So the plants could be used, and they say this because crops are usually what you would have to produce food for consumption. Transgenic plants are not always for our consumption. In two different ways. Sometimes it's for indirect consumption because grazing animals, livestock, they will eat the plants that are genetically altered, and then we would eat those livestock animals. So that's indirect consumption. Direct consumption would be people who eat edible flowers, for instance, people who eat dandelion leaves, for instance. That would be an example of that. Soybeans, beans, rice, corn, those plants. Crops are things that are processed, put into a can, lined with BPA and other things. So those are the crops. They would be considered products that have higher processing. Plants are, your produce section, basically, to keep it short. So Japan appears to set to follow the U.S. example. So what they want to do is the same thing the U.S. is doing, is saying that they don't really need to have any extra screening as long as they can show that it was by CRISPR and that the integrity is still there. The problem is the recommendations they have leave open the possibility of requiring safety evaluations if there are insufficient details on the editing technique. The technique of editing genetics for plants that are going to be crops for consumption is extremely important, because if there's a class action lawsuit later on in the future, or when you have a company that, there's so many possibilities. You could have a company that would obtain or begin to become almost a monopoly over other companies with the CRISPR food, based on taste, based on flavor, based on nostalgia, things like that, and put other traditional businesses, out of business, essentially. Another issue is it's called agricultural terrorism, where you could have one company that will grow their crops near another company's fields, for instance, or wherever they have their crops, their plants. And if they are giving off certain pheromones, or they're giving off a certain chemical, could actually kill those traditional plants. So there's a lot of different things that are good and bad. Good for the country because Japan's public relations right now is not as good when it comes to safety, when it comes to radiation. and nuclear energy when it comes to a lot of different things, even defense. So they're having to, I think, go to these lengths, which are not as extreme as you think, in order to, I think, somewhat, I guess, repair some of the damage that has been done, especially from 2011, even before 2011. But because they had issues with that Daiichi plant before, they had issues with the Daiichi plant before it went up. But I will say that there are certain foods. If we come here, I think this is the one. Here it is. So the country at the end, the last paragraph, I apologize for that. Whether consumers will embrace the new technology remains to be seen. Japan has approved the sale of GMO foods that have passed safety tests as long as they are labeled. But the public wariness has limited consumption and has led most Japanese farmers to shun the GMO crops. The country does import sizable volumes of GM processed food and livestock feed, however. Japan has researchers that are reportedly working on gene edited potatoes, tomatoes, rice, chicken, and fish. Sone also says that thorough explanations of the new technologies are needed to ease public concerns. So I hope this was interesting to you. I would not want to see CRISPR foods in any grocery store that I frequent. I don't know how you all feel about that, but it may be coming to a store in Japan. The way that you can buy groceries online directly from Japan also means that these foods could be in like a convenience store or even a international grocery store in the near future. Of course, with regulations, it could still happen. We see in different grocery stores where you have international foods from around the world, especially from Asia, even from Africa. I've seen different food products from Africa as well. But you all let me know what you think in the comments section. Like, comment, share, subscribe. I will leave links to these articles in the description box. Let me know what you think about this. It reminds me of Soylent Green and a bunch of other things, because we don't know what genes are being altered. We don't know what genes, because CRISPR involves, you're using molecular scissors that are very precise. You're cutting genes out, you're putting genes in, you're switching genes around to improve a lot of different issues with food that we have right now. But I don't want to go on too long. You all let me know what you think in the comment section, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Peace.